You're going to showboat, knock down the shot.
For what his value is, it doesn't equate to winning basketball.
When you're talking about the greatest of greats, that's what you have to do. You have to nitpick.
We'll see you in the playoffs. We'll see you in the playoffs.
Welcome, everybody, to the Tee 'em Up podcast. I'm Jace Eustace, joined, as always, by my co-host here, Jared Huff. And Jared, we are halfway through the play-in tournament. We know pretty much all of the matchups besides just a couple games that we're going to be waiting on. But it's playoff season, baby. It's playoffs. We're here. How you feeling?
I'm so excited. I've been waiting for this time for months. Not as high on it as I would have been a few months ago with the way the Bulls are. But, hey, this is going to be one of the best playoffs ever. I mean, look at the East this year. We probably haven't seen an Eastern Conference like this in our entire lifetime. I mean, it's like a March Madness bracket. Who knows who's going to win some of these series? I have a pretty good idea on some, but I think majority of the series on both ends of the bracket are going to be super exciting.
Oh, yeah.
As NBA fans, we are very lucky, very privileged with this.
Oh, season. Yeah. It's going to be a ton of fun. And for this, you know, those have been listening to us for a while. What we pretty much do on the podcast is we kind of just run through and give our takes on a lot of the stories. But now as we're kind of leading into the playoffs, we're taking a little bit of different approach to this one. We're going to be giving you, our playoff predictions as far as the first round matchups, what we have so far. And we also want to break down what's happened so far with the play-in tournament, which some people don't like. I'm slowly becoming a fan because it kind of gives us that one and done aspect that we really like about March Madness some of the time. So I'm just going to go ahead and start it here. Let's start with the Timberwolves and Clippers game. So Timberwolves took that win 109-104. Jared, I know you were probably watching the game, or if you weren't watching it live, I'm sure you definitely caught up on it. So what was your takeaway from this game, especially for the Timberwolves who are advancing on in that 7 seed?
Oh, I made sure for those Monday night games that my butt was planted right in front of my TV. And that Clippers T-Wolves game had to have been one of the best games. I don't even know what you call it. It's not a regular season game. It's not really a playoff game.
It's kind of its own thing.
I'm going to kind of lump it in with the regular season games and just say that was one of the better games. Aside from the pacing due to the refs, that was one of the better games I've seen all season. It was chippy throughout, the personalities. You got Marcus Morris going against Pat Bev, almost had double technicals. Morris almost got through out of the game at that stage. But, that's just what I love about the NBA. I love the chippiness. I love the just opponents not liking each other in the moment. I love the whole Pat Bev storyline of just wanting to go against the Clippers because that was a team that basically pushed him off the side and said, yeah, we really don't need you. Here, we're going to trade you. Yeah. And I'm just here for all of it. And just all the personalities in that game, it really makes me appreciate this time in the NBA because I'm looking down the line and these guys are all in their 30s, like your Marcus Morris's, your Pat Bevs. I don't see many of these young guys kind of replacing some of the personalities, at least where everything sits right now, of some of these role guys. They're not superstars. These are role players. Obviously guys like Trae Young and Luka Doncic have a personality, but I don't see from many of the role players that are coming through the league lately.
No, I agree. This game had a lot to look at. We know you didn't even mention too, kind of the thing that was trending, someone gluing themselves to the court, which kind of took over NBA Twitter during and after the game, but we're not going to touch too much on that. But, for me personally, my biggest takeaway was kind of on the Clippers side. I think people around the NBA kind of as that play-in approach, they got really high on the Clippers. And I think they looked at the team kind of in comparison to the Lakers. And I think that was to their detriment. Don't get me wrong, the Clippers are such a better roster than the Lakers, but I think everybody around the league looked at it and they're like, oh, they're a lot better than the Lakers. And that's true, but a lot better than the Lakers doesn't necessarily mean they're still a great basketball team. They are where they're at in the standings because of how they've played. And I get it. Paul George, they haven't had Kawhi Leonard, but don't get me started on Kawhi Leonard. Seems like he hasn't played in 3 years. But, I thought the Timberwolves would win this game. You had them, I went back and looked, you had them dropping completely out of the play-in, so losing this game and the would-be next one. But I went back and listened to your take, and I have to give you credit, and this is for this reason. You said the Timberwolves are just happy to be there. And you were dead on because they celebrated this game like it was game 7 of the NBA Finals, man. They were jumping on tables. They were ecstatic. They were going everywhere. It was it was the NBA championship for them to get into the playoffs. And I get it. You know, this is a franchise that hasn't been to the playoffs in forever. I'm not going to sit here and say, you know, act like you've been there before, because they haven't been there before. So you can't say that, you know, that's not the Timberwolves. It's not what they do. But, you know, Beverley, he did his thing, and I'll touch on him a little bit later. Anthony Edwards, to me, he was the biggest takeaway. He took over down the stretch at the end of the third quarter, leading into the fourth quarter. Anthony Edwards really was the driving force of that team. And we've kind of seen his growth. You know, we've seen what he's capable of. He's had these big scoring outputs. You know, D'Angelo Russell hit some big shots. We've seen him do. He was hitting the ice in his veins celebration that he's become known for. Karl-Anthony Towns had a rough game in this one. He really did, but they still won. To me, that's encouraging for the Timberwolves. Paul George did his thing, but, you know, you're going to have to give them more. I think he had, 34, 36 points. He had a good game.
He started off really rough. He was like 3 or 14 at some point.
Yeah. No, but he's going to have to give them more if they want to stay alive, because now the Clippers are at a point where their backs are against the wall, and, you know, they're going to have a tough opponent coming up to try to get into that 8 seed to then go play the Phoenix Suns. So that's not a good prize if you win your next game.
Yeah. And I'm not too disappointed in my take that the Timberwolves are going to fall out completely out of the playoff picture, because how Cat played kind of validates just how I feel about this Timberwolves team. Now, obviously Anthony Edwards, and I mean, it definitely does rely on a good D'Angelo Russell night.
Yeah.
Because if that weren't the case, if D'Angelo Russell's first quarter struggles continued throughout the rest of the game, it would have been a Clippers win and a completely different story. Karl-Anthony Towns has just shown consistently he's not really ready for these big moments. I mean, he had 11 points. He was scoreless through, I think, the first half, or at least he didn't have a field goal. And he was just like not playing smart basketball on both ends. Like, on one of the plays, I think when he picked up his 5th foul, he trucked through 2 players like Batum, which that should have been called immediately. I don't know why Scott Foster, who had no problem blowing the whistle that game, did not call that. Yeah. But then they finally got Cat on for his 5th foul on I forgot who he knocked down after that. But like, it's like, we get you frustrated, but you have to like level your head, and that's your team is only going to go as far as you can carry them, because you're not going to see a consistent D'Angelo Russell, Anthony Edwards duo every single night, especially going against a tough team like the Grizzlies. They're going to need Cat to be regular season Cat. We can't have any more of this playoff Cat that basically scared Jimmy Butler away from Minnesota.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And for the Wolves, they'll start to focus, like you said, on the Grizzlies, and the Clippers are going to have to prepare for their next opponent. Let's move on to their game here. As we got the Spurs versus the Pelicans. Pelicans took this one 113-101. So, Jarrett, what was your takeaway from this game when you were watching the other night?
The game's it went exactly the way I expected it to happen. Out of all the playing situations, I felt like it was a lock. I could bet my entire life savings on FanDuel or something, and then not have to worry about not getting that money back and whatever profit I'd make on the Pelicans winning. DeJounte Murray is a great player, but there's not much behind him. And the Pelicans are one of those teams where they're a sneaky, really good roster. Essentially, they're literally the only thing they're missing is a superstar, a role that Zion Williamson, who had no problem doing 360 dunks in the layup line, was doing. So, be that as it may, this Pelicans roster, bolstered by the acquisition of CJ McCollum around the trade deadline, they're going to be a tough out. Honestly, I could see a world where the Clippers don't get past them, especially if they struggle offensively like they did on Monday night. I still think the Clippers are going to advance into the playoffs, but it's going to be a really good Pelicans-Clippers matchup.
See, I'm very interested that you went that way, because I saw this game a little bit differently, and I know the Pelicans, they looked good. Their stadium was absolutely rocking there in New Orleans. They looked like they were willing this team on to victory when they were having their slumps. But I'm worried about them against the Clippers, because this game should not have been as close as it was. I mean, DeJounte Murray for the Spurs could not buy a bucket for most of the game. Keldon Johnson, I think, didn't have a field goal until the third quarter. Devin Vassell was their leading scorer, the shooting forward on the outside. The Spurs were able to cut down the lead in the fourth quarter. I believe they made it was 9, maybe even 7 at some point. They fought all the way back, and the Spurs were looking like, hey, just a couple more plays here and there, and this is a real game down the stretch. CJ McCollum was fantastic. He was doing exactly what he was brought in to do. Brandon Ingram gave you 27. Jonas Valanciunas gave you 22. This was a game. It was encouraging because, it was obviously a must-needed win because you lose and you go home. But if I'm looking ahead, I'm looking at the Clippers taking this next game pretty easily just because I think the Pelicans, they just, without Zion Williamson down low, kind of playing that not center role, maybe kind of like point forward, point wing type guy that Zion would kind of fill, I just don't think they're as big of a threat. And if you're going Paul George in that roster versus CJ McCollum, and I think Paul George edges him out, Brandon Ingram is great, but I just think the Clippers have more experience. They're more poised, and I'm worried because I would have been a lot more encouraged to see the Pelicans win this game by 20, 25 points. And instead, it was a 10-point victory, which, about 4 minutes left in the game could have very easily been a 3, 4, 5-point victory. So I don't know. Right now, I'm looking at picking, the Clippers in that game, but that's what we got so far for the play-in side on the West. So we're going to go we're going to go over to the East side. The Nets-Cavaliers game. So the Nets won 115-108. So, Jared, I'm interested from your perspective. What was your takeaway from seeing this game?
Well, the game played out exactly how I'd expect. Kyrie and Kevin Durant are going to get theirs. Kyrie looked amazing. And at one point when he was 12 for 12, I'm like, all right, Kyrie, don't shoot anymore. Just let the game happen. Then I think he went 0 for 3 after that, but still a spectacular game by Kyrie. Kevin Durant looked great. He was in some really tough shots, including his first, where he was basically behind the backboard getting doubled, and it didn't even matter. He was going to make it. And as a fan, just watching the game, I'm like, oh, that's in. And it was in. Bruce Brown looked really competent, which almost kind of sounds like a backhanded compliment.
Oh, my.
Because sometimes that man is so frustrating to watch, but he was looking really good in the pick and roll game. And they're going to need that from him going forward. The problem with this Nets team is there's not much offense coming from anywhere else, especially with Seth Curry being hobbled. They have to have Kyrie and Durant playing at an exceedingly high level every single game. And not just one of them, not just this night's Kyrie's night and this night's Durant's night, but both of them at the same time. Like, they're going to need these guys to average like 60 to 70 points as a duo. These guys are going to be playing plus 40 minutes all throughout the playoffs. It's going to wear on these guys, I think, because that Cavs team that was hobbled, no Jarrett Allen, they kept it close. The Nets couldn't pull away the entire game, and that was a glaring issue I noticed because it felt like with how Kyrie and Durant were playing, why aren't the Nets pulling away?
Yeah, this game seemed really similar to me to the Pelicans game, and that's kind of why I'm concerned about the Nets because they didn't finish what looked like it should have been a blowout. And I give a lot of credit to the coaching on the Cleveland Cavaliers side because to me, that's coaching with a young squad to not let the Nets pull away. Just continue to hang in the game, make some tough shots, tighten things up on defense, make it a game and try to win it there at the end. I really like to see that. The Cavaliers might not do anything this year at all, but that is really encouraging moving forward. They've done a great job with that team, great job with that roster. So regardless of how this season ends, which it could end in one more game or it could end with a matchup against the Miami Heat. So, but I'm encouraged to see that. But, this game, how do I say this? I know it's not how the game is scored, but just going back and looking at things, the Cavaliers won 3 out of the 4 quarters that they played. The reason why the Nets were able to obviously get the win is because they scored 40 points in the first quarter and were up 20-40 at the end of the first. Garland took a while to get going. He finished with 34. Mobley got 19 in kind of his first high pressure type of playoff atmosphere game. It was nice to see that.
Good.
He didn't look too big for the moment. He didn't have one of his best games, but he was definitely a solid contributor. Looked good in that game. Love, LeVert, Markkanen all gave you double figures. So it was a good game for the Cavs. Kyrie was damn near perfect. KD gave you 25, and what I was most encouraged about KD, gave you 11 assists, which when KD can sit back and actually be a facilitator and he doesn't have to go get 35, 40 points, which on this Nets roster, a lot of the times he has to do that. That's when they're at the most dangerous. But to me, this was a typical Nets game. They just hope they can score enough to win because their defense is not stopping the nosebleed. And that's just the way that they do this. And the Nets are lucky that Allen was hurt, because I think if he's in there and he's effective, he definitely could have made a 7-point difference in this game as far as his rim protection and the offense that he provides. So I don't know. Nets now are going to have a matchup against the Boston Celtics, going to be, highly touted, and everybody's kind of interested to see how that goes down. And kind of the last note we have here is it just kind of got thrown at us over the last 24, 36 hours. I don't know how much faith we're putting in it, but Ben Simmons returning for game 4 of the first round of the NBA playoffs. Is that happening? Like, what do you think?
I feel like if it's being put out there, and just with all the scrutiny Ben Simmons has come under of, he's going to come back possibly like March 15th, and then he doesn't come back during the regular season at all.
Yeah.
I feel like with this news coming out, he has to play now, or it's only just going to get worse. It's only going to get worse from here the longer he sits.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't understand how, if he's not playing basketball for almost an entire year, why is his back hurt? Why is he out now? I don't want to question anyone's mental health because we don't know what people are going through. But just based on the situation and everything, like there's questions about, like, is he really like in a space where he can't play? So I just feel like with this news coming out, there has to be some truth to it. I hope for the Nets' sake, because they're going to need him, especially in a series with a wing they're going against like Jason Tatum. Ben Simmons would be a perfect player to bring into that series. But then there's questions of, well, how fast can they bring him along? I mean, going into a playoff setting for your first games in almost a year, like, that's not easy. That's not even for any pro. That's not easy, especially one in Ben Simmons' situation where he was kind of broken after the Hawks series.
Yeah. I think you're right in the fact that now this is being put out, he kind of has to play, like they've kind of shown their hand. But I don't see him playing huge minutes, obviously. And like, aside from the mental health stuff, we don't know if he's physically ready to play. That hasn't been the story since he got to Brooklyn. It's all been about his back and things like that and what's going on. So it's just about physically, is his body ready to play in this high intense situation when he hasn't had, contact, hasn't been playing full speed basketball. I don't even know if he's been playing scrimmages in practice along with his teammates. So that's a lot to have to hand to someone in, a playoff situation where, hey, you're the underdogs. Do 1 game, 2 games here, and all of a sudden you're back against the wall. Can you really trust him? And we're talking about game 4. Like, for all we know, this game could be 3-0 one direction or the other, as far as, the Nets could be up 3-0, the Boston could be up 3-0, or we could be in a, 2-1 game or 2-1 series. But, I think he can contribute in some defensive spurts. I don't see him contributing much on the offensive end, because the defensive end, a lot of it is just one-on-one. I'm just going to try to stop you from scoring. I think he can help that way, but do you really want to bring a guy who's struggled in high pressure situations back now? I just don't think that's a good move for the Brooklyn Nets. But, the Brooklyn Nets are just trying to throw everything that they possibly can at the Boston Celtics and see what comes up. So,
yeah. Regardless of what happens, this definitely adds another layer to what's likely going to be one of the best first round series we've had.
It will.
In a long time.
It will. Let's move into our last play-in game here, and that was the Hawks versus Hornets game. So this one got out of hand. This one was definitely not a game as we went down the stretch. Hawks won 132-103. So, Jared, what was your takeaway on this one?
Well, the first thing I noticed is that this Hawks team is going to live and die by Trae Young. The game was close early, and a big part of that is Trae Young didn't look great at all, missing a lot of shots, whether it was from outside or floaters in the lane. Nothing was falling for the guy. His playmaking ability definitely was there. Like, he was finding his teammates, especially around the rim, which was definitely helping his team. But in terms of his scoring, it was a detriment to the team. He was kind of lucky that LaMelo Ball was going through the same problems, and Terry Rozier. Terry Rozier, I believe, started 0 for 7 from the field. And he wasn't looking good until midway through the second quarter. But like all good superstars do in playoff situations, unless they're Karl-Anthony Towns, Trae Young figured it out, and they started to blow away the Hornets. But it just shows that this team needs Trae Young to have his A game and basically have an A+ game every night, especially if they want to get into the playoffs and then advance beyond the first round, which I think it's going to be really tough. I don't, if they do get into the playoffs, which I do think they will, I think they're going to beat the Cavs because the Cavs are just inexperienced, shorthanded in comparison to the Hawks, unless Jarrett Allen comes back and he can play like his all-star self. It's going to be really tough for the Cavs. Yeah. But it's weird to say this, I'm rooting for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I don't like saying that.
You don't like Trae Young?
Gross. It leaves a bad. I don't like Trae Young. But it'd just be so nice just to have that quote back up there where he says the regular season's too boring. And then like, well, apparently it was so boring you didn't even bother making the playoffs. So.
Yeah, well, his team didn't. You're right, but he was also, was he top 10 in scoring, top 10 in assists, or was it top 5 in each category? Dude gets his numbers, and he's actually very underrated.
I think he led the league in scoring and assists, which hadn't been done since I think Tiny Archibald in 1973, some stat like that.
No, he gets his.
Tiny made the playoffs. Though.
No, that's all right. And they still might make the playoffs. It's not over yet. But you talked a lot about the Hawks there. I just want to quickly wrap up what the season has basically been for the Hornets. I was a little high on the Hornets. I think I had them as my 8 seed, so I wasn't too far off as what did they come in as the 10 seed, or what they finish as officially.
Had them higher than me.
Yeah, but when you have a terrible defense, you just you gotta hope for misses, and you gotta hope to score a shit ton. I mean, and against the Hawks, you're just not gonna outscore them. That's the end of their season for the Charlotte Hornets. I like a lot of what they had. LaMelo, got things going there towards the end. Terry Rozier, the numbers kind of at the end looked decent, but they need to solve their defense. That's the problem. One of the worst defenses in the league. Hawks scored 6 in double digits. Trae Young, his numbers looked good, but he definitely did not go nuclear by any means, and they still scored 132 points. And one big, X factor I'm looking for in the next game against the Cleveland Cavaliers, if DeAndre Hunter continues to play at this level, it's going to be tough for the Cavs, because DeAndre Hunter, his numbers were not mind-blowing on any stretch of imagination, but DeAndre Hunter had an incredible game on the offensive end and also on the defensive end. So if he continues to play like that, it's going to be tough for the Cavaliers to get into the playoffs. And whichever one of those guys do get into the playoffs, the Miami Heat are sitting there rested and waiting for that first round matchup. So not easy, but that's what's been going on in the play-in game so far. So we're going to have play-in, tournament, I should say, so far. So we got 2 more games to kind of decide those last final seedings. So we're going to have the Clippers obviously hosting the Pelicans, and then we're going to have the Cavaliers hosting the Atlanta Hawks. So we'll see how everything kind of finds who going into the playoffs. We'll see who gets that first round matchups against the number 1 seeds in each conference. But speaking of the seeds in each conference, this is what we've been waiting for, man. We essentially have our first round matchups, and this is what we got to do. We got to do some breakdowns, and we got to give our predictions. So I'm thinking, you want to start in the East or in the West? I'm good either way.
We started in the West for the plan, so let's start out East.
Start out East. All right. So starting out in the East, I'm going to start with our number 1 seed, Miami Heat. They'll be taking on the Hawks or the Cavs. So Jarrett, what's your prediction for this series? I know we don't have our matchup quite yet, but you can kind of fill in the blank. What is your prediction for this matchup?
Well, as I mentioned a little earlier, I expect the Hawks to beat the Cavs on Friday. So it's going to be a Heat-Hawks first-round matchup. And let's be honest, the Hawks, they're overmatched offensively. I mean, this Heat team, they're deep. They've shown that multiple times during the season. When you had Butler out and you had Bam Adebayo out, guys that you didn't even know, guys that weren't in the league last year, guys you can't even pronounce their names, were coming off the bench and putting in good minutes of basketball. This team is one of the deepest in the NBA. Lucky you, Jace.
Oh, yeah.
They have a lot of veterans on this team who have seen varying degrees of success in the NBA playoffs. They have two, just off the top of my head, former NBA champions in Kyle Lowry and PJ Tucker, very recent NBA champions at that. Mm-hmm. Jimmy Butler has some final experience, who I expect to completely reverse what he showed in last year's playoffs, which was very dismal. And Bam also has a lot of experience. This team is full of experienced guys, and Tyler Herro has been phenomenal this year. I'm really excited to see how he lights it up in the playoffs. The Hawks consistently for offense and just putting up big numbers, they can really only rely on Trae Young. You can't do that against this Heat team. You're going to need to find other guys that are going to be consistent through a 4+ game series. And in the Hawks case, if they're going to come out and win this one, it's going to take way more than 4 games. I don't think they have those guys that can consistently support Trae Young. And I don't even think Trae Young can consistently find ways to have an A+ game every night. It's going to be really tough. It's going to be Heat in 5.
Heat in 5? I like to hear that. I also have the Hawks moving on into this series. I think they will take out Cleveland Cavaliers, unfortunately. I got the Heat in 5 as well. I think Miami is almost, because, I mean, they are the 1 seed, and we do talk about them in that aspect. With that respect, they've been disrespected a little bit. No one really talks about them coming out of the East. Everybody talks about, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, heck, even Boston. Now everybody's talking about Brooklyn can still make a run. And we forget about the number 1 seed in the East, who has been the best team in the Eastern Conference from the beginning to the end. That's how things are measured where we're sitting at in the season. So I think with Miami, they can win in so many different ways. They can have a game where Tyler Herro comes off the bench and just is knocking everything down from the 3-point line, giving you 30, 35 points. You can have a defensive battle where Jimmy Butler is the leading scorer with 24 points. You can have a Kyle Lowry game where he's up there getting 15 assists, is distributing everywhere. You can have a Bam Adebayo game where he's locking down your best player on the perimeter and in the paint. They're just so versatile. And like you said, they're a fairly young team. If you take out kind of Kyle Lowry and PJ Tucker, kind of the old heads, obviously up there along with Udonis Haslem, but obviously he doesn't play. They have such experience for being so young. And yes, there's some new guys, Max Strus, Martin, guys like that don't have that experience. But I think Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, obviously you have a player coach in Udonis Haslem. Bam Adebayo's been there. He's done that. So I love Miami in this matchup. I had them in 5 games as well. And the only reason I'm giving the Hawks 1 game is because I think Trae Young will go berserk from 1 game. I think he'll will them to a victory. And I think, maybe just because Miami's kind of been sitting out, hasn't been playing these high tense games, they give up a game, maybe game 2, maybe game 3.
I was thinking that Trae Young game is going to be game 4, their final homestand to avoid elimination.
But that could be possible as well. It definitely could be possible.
Just right there, Miami eases off the gas a little bit because they're not at home.
Miami likes the gentleman's sweep. We'll go up 3-0, we'll drop game 4, and then we'll finish you in game 5. So exactly. We're both on the same page there, and I think that's how this series is going to end up. But moving down, one of the most highly anticipated things of the entire season now, we got the number 2 seed Boston Celtics and the number 7 seed Brooklyn Nets. So what is your prediction for this matchup?
Well, the only thing that would have made this matchup better had it been the Sixers that got the 2nd seed, and it would have been a Sixers Brooklyn first round. But this is still pretty good. We're still really fortunate to have this series. This series is going to go to 7 games. It's going to be a slugfest. It's going to be some of the old guard in NBA superstars going against a young, new, up-and-coming superstar in Jason Tatum. But I'm going for the underdog in this one. I'm going for the underdog Brooklyn Nets in 7. Let's not forget, the Brooklyn Nets were the 1st seed in the NBA until KD got hurt. There was
with James Harden. You're right.
I mean, yes, that was with James Harden. They were. But it was without Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving, who can now play every single game. Kyrie Irving, who I would say is better than James Harden this season, especially when it comes to scoring the basketball. I mean, let's be honest. The Nets bench, it's not great. Personally, I'm not huge on the Celtics bench either. So the way I see it, it's going to come down to the star players. Jaylen Brown, great player, but he's not always super consistent on offense. Jason Tatum has been fantastic this year. And I kind of expect him to still have a really good, consistent series. KD, no moment's too big for this guy. 2-time finals MVP, almost dragged the Nets into the NBA finals last year had it not been for his toes, where in that world, Mike Budenholzer's fired. Giannis Antetokounmpo is wondering, should I have signed my extension in Milwaukee?
Ooh,
and
you're going down that rabbit hole. All right.
I'm just saying, we were literally 2 big toes away from that reality. And this Nets team, aside from James Harden, who was hurt almost the entire playoffs, may I remind you, and Kyrie Irving was out, it's almost the same team. It is almost the same team, except this year they have Seth Curry, they have Andre Drummond, and they have LaMarcus Aldridge, and Patty Mills is a nice little boost off the bench when he has a good night. This is not as bad of a team when you look at the matchup. I'm not betting against Kevin Durant. So Nets in 7.
This is a tough one because listeners to our podcast could probably argue these are 2 of my least favorite teams. I am not a Boston Celtics fan, and I am not a Brooklyn Nets fan. The Celtics is for different reasons. Theirs is more of a history, and we don't want to give up. We don't want to give up our draft picks, and this is the year, and blah blah blah. Nets are completely different because they just decided we don't need to worry about chemistry. We don't need to worry about the entire history of the NBA and how you go about winning things. They're just trying to take every shortcut imaginable. I'm going Boston Celtics in 7. I'm going 7 as well. This could very easily swing the other way. I am banking on Robert Williams. I think he's going to return. I don't know if it probably won't be game 1, but I think he's going to play a factor in this series. I like the matchup, and to me, the X factor matchup is Marcus Smart. He's probably going to spend a lot of time on Kyrie Irving when he's out there on the court. Marcus Smart is one of those guys who he can be a thorn in people's sides. You're never going to completely stop a superstar like Kyrie Irving or like Kevin Durant. You can only hope to slow them down. I think Boston's shown that they can do enough on the offensive end, especially with the play of Jason Tatum, with Jaylen Brown, with some of their bench guys have given them off the bench. I think Celtics win here, and I think what pushes them over the edge is their coaching. I think they are a well-coached team. I can't say that for Brooklyn. And I think when the going gets tough, we just don't know enough about Steve Nash over there on the sidelines. He's going to be able to push the right buttons. He's going to be able to give them over the top. And I'm going with Udo over there. I hope I'm saying that right. Udo?
Is Ime Udoka?
Udoka. Sorry, excuse me.
Ime Udoka.
But I'm going with Boston. I think they get the edge in coaching, and I think they survive round 1 against the Brooklyn Nets. But that's a tough one, man. I think we like you said, we both have it going 7. It's going to be an amazing series in round 1. It almost seems like it should be at least a second round, if not a conference finals matchup. So,
we knew a couple of these series were going to be like midway through the season.
This is going to be crazy. But now we got to move on to our third matchup here in the Eastern Conference. Bucks versus Bulls. Your team taking on the defending champions, Jared. And I know you're a man of integrity when it comes to your NBA takes. So what is your prediction for this matchup?
So honestly, it may be my hot take, but the Bulls are going to win 1 game. They will take a game. It's not going to be sweep, as many people are projecting. So that is my hot take for the NBA playoffs. If you thought my Nets take was hot, no. The Bulls are going to take
the hot take is that they'll take a game. I like it.
Game 3 at home, because why not?
Why not?
So let's be honest. The Bulls team down the stretch, something broke, and it broke bad. We don't have Lonzo Ball. We don't have any rim protection. We don't have enough big bodies, which for some reason, as I've been preaching for anyone to hear since this trend came around, small ball is it's not sustainable. Sure, it might work for some teams, but you have to have the right personnel. And in this situation, the Bulls clearly need some more big guys. Tristan Thompson, who I consider a small ball center because the man was a power forward for most of his life in the NBA until LeBron came around and they moved him to the 5.
Yeah, they made him.
The Mozgov minutes, they weren't it.
They weren't getting it done.
It was not getting the job done. Sorry, Anderson Varejao, you too. They shipped you off to Golden State and still didn't win a championship. That sucks. Can we just shout out to Anderson Varejao? Was on the Cavs and the Warriors in the same era. Didn't win once. Just bad time to be on either team.
That's
anyway,
unlucky.
Getting back to it, it's going to come down to a question. If the Bulls try to remain competitive, what's your game plan here? Are you going to let Giannis get his, or are you going to try to shut him down? Because you can't do both. You could try to shut Giannis down, which is probably going to be a lot harder. So the best course of action for the Bulls to win their 1 game out of 7, one game out of 5, you let Giannis get his, and you try to shut down everyone else. Good luck. I mean, we've seen the defense is not what it was. Alex Caruso alone cannot save it because basically once you break the Bulls perimeter, they're getting to the hoop. Vooch,
Swiss cheese,
who has tried his best, is not a traditional rim protector. He just can't do it. He's an offensive-minded center, and it's going to be really tough for the Bulls. It's going to be a pretty breezy series. It's not going to be like the Bulls' last playoff win, where we're blowing out the Bucks 120-66, and Giannis is an infant in his second year in the league. It's a different Bucks team. It's a vastly different Giannis. It's going to be Bucks in 6 or Bucks in 5, and some people are probably giving me some strange looks for saying it's going to be in 5.
I may subscribe to that because I'm going Bucks in 4, man. I think Bucks absolutely sweep this series. I think they dominate. I think they win on the road in Chicago, move on, and then just take a look around the Eastern Conference at what's going to be their next matchup. Because the Bucks, we talked about Miami being such a deep team. I think the Bucks are up there. They're a very deep, well-rounded team. I like their coaching. I say I like their coaching. I wouldn't say I love Budenholzer by any stretch of imagination, but I think he works well with that team and what he's been able to kind of do over the last few years. I don't know, man. I think they're a wrecking ball, just waiting to get swinging. I think they're a great team. Who's stopping Giannis? I don't see it on the Chicago Bulls roster.
I have an answer.
The Bulls have been trending downward. The Bucks have been trending upward. You know, I'm going to keep this one simple. I'm going Bucks in 4. I think they take the sweep and unfortunately end the season for Chicago.
Hey, I have to throw in though. I think Milwaukee was right there with you last season. They didn't love Budenholzer either.
They liked him. They liked him, but they didn't love him.
They didn't love him, but they loved him to Kevin Durant's toes worth. That's how much they loved him.
Our final matchup here in the first round of the Eastern Conference, we have the Philadelphia 76ers taking on the Toronto Raptors. So, Jarrett, this is another one that a lot of people are out there, some controversial takes, some predictions that are all over the place. So what say you?
Apparently I'm missing something here. I can't tell you how many podcasts, telecasts with playoff predictions I've seen where people are predicting the Raptors over the 76ers. I get the Raptors are a tough team. I get they play hard, but they're missing that one critical thing that matters in the playoffs. They don't have a superstar. They have a bunch of young, intriguing talent. Pascal Siakam has done a complete 180 back to the player that earned that contract he's currently playing on. But they don't have that it guy that can take over a playoff game. The 76ers have that. I mean, realistically, they have 2 of those guys, but one has kind of been MIA since, before the playoffs last year. Joel Embiid could very well be the MVP of this league, and you're going to count him out in the first round against a team most people didn't think would make the playoffs? No, I don't know what I'm missing from this Raptors team. They're a solid team. They have a lot of good players. With a superstar, they'd be a great team, but they're not that. It's going to be 76ers in 6. I'm going to keep it short and simple. Oh, no.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry. I am taking with conviction Toronto Raptors in 7 games.
All right, you got to tell me what I'm missing here.
Toronto reminds me so much of the 2020 Miami Heat, and I know it was the bubble. I know it was everything like that. Miami did not have a superstar by any stretch of the imagination that was going to go out there and score 30 points. I love Jimmy Butler. He is a star in this league. I don't think he's a go-get-a-bucket superstar type of player. He's just a different type of player. Toronto is one of these teams, man. It's hard to put a definition on scrappy, but I'm buying stock in Toronto. Like Pascal Siakam, how about Gary Trent Jr. the season that he's had? Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, those guys, they just have a squad. And Nick Nurse,
Scotty Barnes.
Nick Nurse, who now we're hearing, rumblings about Lakers, which is never happening. First off, he's under contract. He's under contract. And what are the Lakers going to trade to get him? Don't get me started on that type. But Nick Nurse has experience. He's got a squad around him. And on Philadelphia's side, yeah, you got Joel Embiid. And I think he's fantastic. And I think if he wins MVP, even though unfortunately I think they're going to give it to the guy who's got the statistics and who's got the whatever the computers say, they're going to give it to Jokic. But Joel Embiid is fantastic. James Harden, what we've seen of him recently, he does this every time he changes teams. Those first 2 weeks, he reminds you he is James Harden. After that, he just acts like he doesn't care. And now we're in the playoffs, and it's like, oh, well, now he's going to be different in the playoffs. Oh, because he was different where? In the playoffs. The best runs he had on the Rockets, and you could talk about, you want to talk about the big toes for Kevin Durant. He's a Chris Paul hamstring from going to the NBA Finals, but that's just the way that it is. And James Harden, to me, this has collapsed for him, written all over it. I think it's going to be a problem, and it'll be a storyline moving into the season because he technically did not sign an extension when he came there. This could be a real story. And I think if you're Daryl Morey, obviously you have to give him the money. You gave up so many assets to get him. This might be, the hardest one, the most controversial one I have. I'm going Raptors in 7, and I'm booking it. I'm going Raptors in 7. That's how I feel, man.
All right. It's going to be, we'll see. I can't wait for the end of the first round because we do have some different ends of the bracket, different things happening in the bracket. So
I'm going Raptors in 7. I was looking at it, and that's it could easily go the other way. Don't get me wrong, but that's how I feel at this moment.
I think how the bracket would shake out, we have a completely different matchup in the semis because you would have the Celtics facing the Raptors, and I would have the Nets against the 76ers. Oh, I hope I'm right. Other than for me being right, because I love being right. I want to see Nets Sixers so bad.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'd have Nets Raptors, I'd have Celtics Raptors. My bad. Celtics Raptors. Both coming off of Game 7 victories, by the way, is how my prediction goes. That's the East. I'm absolutely looking forward to it. But let's move on over to the West in the first round matchup, or for our first seeds, excuse me. We got the Phoenix Suns who will be taking on the Clippers or the Pelicans. So what is your prediction for this matchup here with the Suns?
Suns in 4.
That's it. I like it.
Oh, did you also want me to say what team I think is going to make it out of the play?
Yeah, sure.
I didn't think it was necessary.
No,
but
go
if
ahead.
You want me to supply that information? I can.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Clippers.
Okay.
Suns in 4.
Okay. I'm gonna go. You want to talk about controversial takes? I'm gonna go Suns in 5.
Oh,
I'm gonna give Suns in 5. And
that's some crazy talk, Jace.
I know.
Calm down, man.
Oh boy. I'm gonna go with the Clippers as well. I'm gonna go Suns in 5. And 5 is generous. The Suns they're gonna coast in round 1. They are definitely nowhere near upset alert. It's gonna be easy. It's gonna be barbecue chicken, as Shaq likes to say. So let's just go out and move on to our second matchup. And this is going to be an interesting one. We got the Memphis Grizzlies, the number 2 seed, taking on the 7 seed Minnesota Timberwolves. So, Jarrett, how is this series going to shake out?
I think this has potential to be one of the best series that we'll see in the entire playoffs. It's both 2 young teams, not much playoff experience. Yes, I'm talking to you, Kat. Your 4 games in 2018 don't really count. Whatever. But it's going to be 2 young teams, not a lot of playoff experience, if any at all, for most of the players in the series going against each other. We're going to see more Pat Beverly for at least 4 games. I think the series is going to go to 6. And the Grizzlies talk the most shit out of any team in the league, going up against the player that talks the most shit against anyone in the league. And I'm here for it. I'm here for the worlds to collide. If we can't have a Clippers-Timberwolves series, I am fine with the Timberwolves-Grizzlies series. So let's go. Cat, for the Timberwolves to be successful in the series, he has to play better. He can't have 11 points. He can't have 6 fouls. He has to play like the guy that call himself an MVP candidate, which I think is egregious in itself, even though he had a great season. But he has to play like the guy that people are calling the best shooting big man of all time. Cat needs to be good. I still think, regardless of the outcome, it's going to be Grizzlies in 6.
Grizzlies in 6. I got the Grizzlies in 5. I am not giving Timberwolves that much credit, for one reason and one reason only. The Timberwolves just won their championship. They're not worried about anything, man. They just won their championship. They're probably still drunk from it. They're having a great time. That's fantastic. And I think we are undervaluing how good the Memphis Grizzlies are, dude. They're going to be they're going to welcome in Minnesota with a nice gentleman's sweep. They're going to give them one game. Pat Beverly's going to do what he's doing. And I don't know if I can find a place to make this bet anywhere, but I'm going to be looking. In these 5 games, or in the series is probably how I'd have to bet it. I'm going to predict that Pat Beverly gets ejected twice. I'm going to see if I can find that somewhere. I bet I can get some decent odds on that. I'm not really sure how that's all going to pan out. But I think Patrick Beverly gets ejected twice. I think the Grizzlies win with or without Ja Morant, as we've seen. Morant is great, and he was an MVP candidate when he's healthy, but they've shown they can win without him as well. So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of weird how I'm not really worried about Ja Morant's health, if he's even going to play. I still think Memphis is just the far better team in this one. Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to shut down Cat. It's Grizz in 5. Timberwolves, great run. Pop your champagne, but it's going to be over real quickly.
Don't worry. If there's ever a game where Ja Morant's not on the court, whatever Cat does on the court most likely will just be net negative. So it's going to balance out.
It'll even out.
Yeah, it'll balance.
Yeah. And I'm going to be looking. I'll let you know if I find that somewhere. I'll let you in on it because that's going to be some easy.
Please do.
Pat Beverly getting ejected twice.
I'd say one's a lock for sure.
Yeah,
twice,
one is a lock. I'm thinking
I can definitely
twice.
See.
I will say that the little caveat there is if he gets ejected so egregiously that he gets suspended for a game, I'm counting that as well because it'll be missing
That's
2
fair.
games. So we'll see because it's in 5 games if he gets ejected in game 3, suspended game 4 or something, yeah. But that's how I see it shaking out. But let's move on to our third matchup here. We got the 3rd seed Golden State Warriors against the 6th seed Denver Nuggets. So how do you see this matchup shaking out?
Well, according to reports, I heard Steph Curry is going to be ready for game 1, which is huge. I'm really excited to see what the Warriors can do. I want to see if they can kind of put together what we saw really early on in this in the season with this team. I want to see if Klay can put together a solid playoff series because let's face it, his return, although people shouldn't be too surprised, it hasn't been an easy return to form. And for most players, it's never a return to form after an Achilles injury. And he not only had he suffered an Achilles injury, there was an ACL that preceded that.
On top of it, yeah.
This series, it's not going to be close. The Warriors are just a deeper team. They can shoot lights out, and once they get hot, especially if it's going to be between Curry, Jordan Poole, or even a Klay Thompson game, they're going to put the Nuggets away so easily because the Nuggets don't have anyone really to match. I think it's going to be Warriors in 5. Jokic, he's gonna get his. He's gonna have a great series, but he just doesn't have the help surrounding him. We already know Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray, they're not coming back, and that's the reality of the situation. So yeah, it's gonna be Warriors in 5.
Man, this is probably the matchup in the first round I'm probably the least adamant about, where I as far as how the games go and everything. Like you said, we're hearing good Steph Curry news. They have good experience. I'm going to go Warriors in 6. I'm going to give the Nuggets a little bit more credit. And I'm surprised to hear you only give them 5 games because it just how the podcast is shaking out. You've kind of been the Jokic. You're not a huge Jokic supporter, I'd say, but I'd say definitely more than I. And I'm giving Jokic credit because he's about to be back-to-back MVP, whether I agree with it or not. And I think if you're back-to-back MVP, we should have to ask you to win a couple games in the first round. I don't think that's too much to ask from back-to-back MVP. So, Jokic, he's a problem. He's definitely a problem. And I think he's a matchup problem for the Warriors. They're going to need the play of, Draymond Green's going to have to play bigger than he's probably ever played because that's probably going to be his primary assignment, even though obviously Draymond is a way undersized center, especially compared to Jokic. I think at the end of the day, Steph Curry does what he's going to do. I think, the Warriors have the experience. Jordan Poole, I think he's going to be a sneaky. I know they don't give away MVP awards in the first series MVPs, but I think he could be a sneaky this series MVP pick. So I'm going with the Warriors in 6. I'm going to give the Nuggets a few games. So our final matchup here in the first round, we got the Dallas Mavericks, the number 4 seed, taking on the number 5 seed Utah Jazz. So how was this one shaking out?
Well, real quick, I just have to say it's kind of funny how no one mentioned All-Star starter Andrew Wiggins. Moving on. I know it's ridiculous.
Yeah, why wouldn't we?
It's ridiculous. Yeah. All right. So this Mavericks Jazz series, it's going to be simple as this. The Mavericks aren't going to have Luka game 1, potentially game 2 or more. The man was seen in the boot at the last Mavericks game. And even with Luka, I know this team has overachieved since the trade deadline after moving from Porzingis. But in the playoffs, this team just doesn't have enough depth. They don't have enough talent in the starting lineup. There's not enough people around Luka where, yeah, we can rag on the Jazz and Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell's seemingly fractured relationship. But at the end of the day, for the most part, this is the same Jazz team we've seen the last 3 or 4 seasons. So they've been through this. They've been past the first round. They, aside from Luka, they have more talent when comparing rosters. If you take away the top players on the Mavs and the top players away on the Jazz, it's not a question whose roster is better. They have way more experience. They have better players. It's gonna be a quick series. It's gonna be Jazz in 5.
Jazz in 5.
Jazz in 5. Luka's not going to be playing at least a game.
Boy, I'm going to say this with conviction. Dallas Mavericks in 7.
Oh.
I don't care if Luka is out game 1. I don't even care if Luka is out game 2. And I am so pissed that Luka got hurt playing in a meaningless game. It's that pisses me off beyond belief, because I thought we were about to see an absolute ascension of guy going from a very talented young and up and coming player to a true superstar and on his way to be a legend of this game. I thought this was going to be the playoffs that we're going to start to see that. And we still might. I think Luka is going to push back to be back as soon as he possibly can, even if it might even be to the detriment of himself. But I don't see, if Luka misses game 1, say they lose game 1, I think he's going to push for game 2. And if they force him to be out in game 2, obviously he's hoping when he comes back, the series is 1-1. Obviously, a lot of this is up in the air. I'm just putting faith in Luka. I think he'll come back, even if they're down 0-2. I think they take this game, this series. I think they're going to need it in 7. And part of this is the matchup. I don't think Utah is that good of a team. Like you said, there's a fractured relationship between 2 of their best players. Quinn Snyder looks like he's about to be on the outs, already talking about how he doesn't want to take the Lakers coaching job, but that's a story for a different day. But it just doesn't look like a lot of the guys in that locker room are going to be around for the long haul. And I think even up 2-0, I still wouldn't be worried about Dallas, especially if we're starting to hear some news about Luka being back. So I'm putting faith in Dallas. I think it's going to take them 7 games to get there. But I think the Mavericks are the play here. Mavericks in 7.
And the worst part about Luka getting hurt in that game is he appealed the suspension because whatever tech he picked up the game before would have got him suspended for that game, and the NBA rescinded that. Just to think, if he was suspended for that game,
just sit it out.
Different conversation.
Oh man, well yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how all this stuff plays out. How all of our predictions come down. It's going to be such a fun first round of the playoffs. And then obviously after the first round, then we get the next round to see how things are all going to shake out. But we got to move on to our final segment here on the Tee 'em Up podcast. And that's obviously Tee 'em Up. So Jarrett, who gets your technical foul this week?
I alluded to this a little earlier in the podcast, but Scott Foster and the officiating crew during the Clips Timberwolves game, I'm teeing y'all up because that was the longest first half of basketball of my life.
More referees.
So I work for right now. We're transitioning back into sports media within the coming months. More to talk about that later. But I work your typical 9 to 5 job that usually sees me working 7 to 3. So I'm up early. So when we got these West Coast games, I would like them to move at a pace to where I can see the whole game and then get to bed at a decent time. That did not happen. You know why? Because the first half of basketball lasted like 2 hours. It was insane. There was a whistle every, like, I love a gritty, chippy game, but my God, the game doesn't have to stop every 10 seconds. And then Glue Girl, so that's through another like break in the game. It was just no one wanted the game to end, apparently. So I'm teeing up Scott Foster. I should just tee up Scott Foster for being Scott Foster alone. And even on the opening tip, like he was like moving around, like who was even jumping in that game? It would have been Towns and someone else.
Yeah.
Zubats. And like he was kept like he was like over like adjusting the mechanics, which added another like 20 minutes onto the game of like, oh, you have to stand here during the tip. And it was a lot. So teaming up Scott Foster and his officiating crew.
You're gonna have a problem with this one. I already know you're going to, but let's just get into
fighting gloves on.
I'm teeing up Patrick Beverley. I'm doing it. I don't care. And to me, it's crazy the amount of unearned confidence that this man plays with, and how for some reason, why is he the dirty player in the NBA that gets celebrated in the media? Every other dirty player, and yeah, he's a dirty player. Every other dirty player, we completely roast in the media for this, that, or the other. And you could say, for good reason, they like being the villain. But why is Patrick Beverley the one that we applaud? It makes no sense. He gets celebrated because he does what he does. Like, he's just a winner. That's just what he does. But is he? Like, congrats. You're being your annoying self. You're the 5th or 6th best player on the Wolves. Good luck with Memphis. You're gonna need it. You guys it could be 4 games. It could be a nice week, nice little a trip to the playoffs for you guys. But don't worry, you popped your champagne already, but you're not going to get a chance to pop another one.
All right. In most cases, Pat Beverley, I would say his dirty play isn't necessarily malicious in intent. I mean, some of those Westbrook, dirty. I'm not saying he's not a dirty player, but he's not like malicious, like to the extent of a Grayson Allen where he's knocking guys out of the sky or intentionally tripping like guys at like full speed. Although there's the one where he dived at Westbrook's knee and was that 2013. That wasn't great. But let's be honest here. There is a world where Pat Beverley is a Miami Heat player. There is that world. He was drafted by the Heat, I believe. Or no, he was picked up by the Heat after the draft. And then LeBron James rolls into town and basically like, nah, don't want him on the roster. I'd rather have a
decision LeBron James ever made as a general.
No, because see, I think Pat Beverley would be great for the Miami Heat and that culture.
I don't want
that mentality. Nope. This guy, why I think fans love him is because he wears his heart on his sleeve. He has that underdog mentality. I mean, the man, he's a player he's a player from Chicago. You could tell. And oh my God, like he would be the perfect player for the Chicago Bulls because by God, we need some backbone. Pat Beverley, like you can argue he's one of the big reasons why this Timberwolves season has gone as successful. He went to a team that has been called weak.
I wouldn't argue that though.
One of the other tough guys in the league in Jimmy Butler. Yeah. And from a lot of the evidence we've seen, especially what Kat showed us on Monday night, there's some soft guys on that team.
Yeah.
And I think Pat Beverley has definitely hardened some of the players on that team. I think him and Anthony Edwards are a good pairing together in terms of like, that's a guy that Anthony Edwards can get a dog. I mean, Anthony Edwards already probably has that dog mentality, but I think those two are a great combo together. I like that, Bev.
What does Patrick Beverley do well on a basketball court?
He's a menace. He disrupts the flow of the game.
Is he a good shooter?
No.
Is he? He'll
hit some big shots.
Is he a great one-on-one defender? Great. Is he a great one-on-one defender?
No, he's not great. But that's the thing. He disrupts the flow of the game.
Is he a great distributor from the guard position?
No, he's not really even technically.
Is he a high-volume shooter, a high-efficiency player?
No.
Is he a good rebounder for his size?
Not really.
And half the teams he has been on would argue he's not even a good leader. So I'm just what is he great at? He's not that great. I can't stand Patrick Beverley, man.
Well, ask the franchises that keep bringing him back because he's been in the league.
For him, we make excuses for his dirty play because he wears his heart on his sleeve. And I don't know why he's the chosen one. I don't know.
He wasn't that dirty on Monday night, though, aside from the scuffle.
No.
Morris.
I'm just talking about this confidence that he plays with that is just, I get it, be confident, but I can still hate you for saying you haven't done anything in this league that you think, hey, I'm a 6-time champion. Oh boy, you've been to the playoffs every single year. Congrats. Like, what does that mean? Like, what have you done once you got there? Nothing. So that's just the way that I see it, man. But we got to get going. That's all we have this week for the TM Up podcast. Thank you guys all for joining us as we gave you all of our predictions for the first round, and we're all excited to see the playoffs officially kick off. So be sure to follow along on all of our social media platforms for some more fun NBA content throughout the week. So thank you guys for listening. We'll catch y'all later.